So I found something that does both. After a tremendous amount of test shots, what I've landed on is this. What's up? Welcome back to a fresh new video, and we're coming up on a 1-year anniversary of the COVID-19 pandemic. I know a lot of us have been challenged, some maybe more than others. I hope you're able to take some time this week, do some reflecting, and find your biggest lessons from the year. That might have got a little bit too deep, because today we're talking about S-Cinetone, which is the part 2 video. Part 1 was last week, and that was talking about how to expose for S-Cinetone, which was extremely well received. Thank you to everybody who checked that out. We got a lot of new subscribers on the channel here, so welcome to every single one of you. The big question that we're diving into today is going to be, how does S-Cinetone perform up against the beast, sLOG3, and which picture profile is going to be my go-to. I'm actually shooting in it right now, so hit the comments down below, maybe put some guesses out there. Don't go to the conclusion section of the video, put your comment down below, put your guess out there. Hopefully you're right. Before we get into the setup, test shots, and overall conclusions for this video, I do need to say that I'm not the most technically sound person to be doing a review like this. That would be somebody like Gerald Undone, who's an absolute savage and somebody that I learned from. It's got like dynamic range checkers and all types of things that are really beneficial to all of us. My style is going to be coming at it a little bit more so for my practical uses of something like sLOG3 or S-Cinetone, which one looks the best to me, and then showing all of you how did I get to that end result. The setup for today is going to be extremely simple. Just like last time, we're going to have two subjects. One is going to be for skin tones, which will be me, and the next one is going to be shooting on a non-human subject. The two picture profiles that we're using, the first one is going to be sLOG3. The color mode on that is going to be S-Gamut3 Cine. I don't change anything else at all except down in detail. I put that down at -2, and I actually don't do any sharpening in post. I like how -2 looks coming out of the A7S3 on 4K. I think when you leave that at 0 or you do too much sharpening in post, I think your image starts to look a little bit too digital, and I know that because I was making that mistake in the early videos of this channel. The next picture profile is going to be picture profile 11. That's going to be S-Cinetone. I leave that as completely default, except for, again, in the detail, I bring that down to -2. White balance, we're going to be locking that off at 5600. My key light, which is the Amaran 100D, fantastic light by the way, that's a 5600 Kelvin light, so I lock off the white balance at 5600. Exposure, for skin tones, we're going 85% on the zebras, and for the subject, we're going to be putting that to 90. I know in my last video, the part 1 of this series, I did do my subjects at 95%. After really looking at that and really reading some of the comments, I actually do think, and I agree with some of you, that 90 is a better IRE to expose for a non-human subject. For sLOG3, the exposure is going to be a little bit different than in S-Cinetone. We're going to be using the Phantom LUTs, which I'm a big fan of, and in the README document that comes along with those LUTs, what is said is that to expose for what looks good. We don't need to overexpose for these Phantom LUTs, so what I found for the skin tone, I think they mentioned in the README to aim for 55, but also do what looks good to you. I found that exposing skin tones to 65% on the IRE makes a lot of sense for what I'm trying to get out of that picture profile, and you'll see what I mean once we get into these test shots. For a non-human subject, I'm going to be putting the zebras at 90. And the last quick point on the setup is that I'm going to be doing all of this on my A7S3. That's our setup for today. We're going to be jumping into Premiere. I'll show you some of these clips. I'll talk through some very light color grading. It's not a full color grading video. And then after Premiere, we're going to kind of toggle back and forth in between, Premiere as well as these shots being up on screen so you can compare them. After both of those things, I'll come back to you with my conclusions, final thoughts, where I'll be using this picture profiles, where I won't be, and what my overall go-to is going to be from here. All right, so here we are in Premiere. I've got these clips loaded up over here, and don't worry about these ones on the left. We'll talk about those later. All right, first shot here, this is our sLOG3. This is S-Cinetone. We have our sLOG3 on the non-human subject, and then we also have S-Cinetone on the non-human subject. So I've got everything actually colored up and ready to go. So I'm just gonna turn on all of my color adjustments. In fact, this top layer, that's my stylized look. We'll leave that off for now. So let's turn on all of these. I actually don't have anything to turn on on this one because out of camera, S-Cinetone looks pretty good. And then over here, let's go ahead and turn that on. That's sLOG3. And then I did make a small adjustment on this S-Cinetone just to get them to match as much as possible on the scopes. So first shot here, sLOG3. All I did, pretty simple, is I added that phantom LUT on. It's the brand new S3 version just on neutral. And then I made some tweaks to the image just to get the exposure dialed in and to try to get it to match this S-Cinetone one as close as possible. And what I can say, the really nice thing about these phantom LUTs for sLOG3, I actually think that they look extremely similar to S-Cinetone, which is really nice. So again, the only tweaks I made, you can see I brought the highlights down a little bit, changed the whites to get the exposure, like I said, to match S-Cinetone. I think I added just, I didn't even add a curve, I just left it alone. I made it as simple as possible to get them to match. So quick before and after of that light grade on sLOG3, that's what we get, and I think that's one of the best looking sLOG3 images that I think I've gotten. S-Cinetone, pretty straightforward. Again, I didn't do anything. Got exposure right, and that was it. But let's pop both of these up on screen right now. Full export, full resolution, so you can check out some of the differences. All right, so for the non-human subjects here, log doing what it does best, squishing the information right in the middle here. You can see that I exposed the subject, the hottest part of that, just at 90 like we talked about. That's probably that road logo being the whitest white in there. But when I turn my correction on, we get an image that I think looks fantastic. And this one is the same thing. I just added that phantom LUT on here, and just that alone does a lot. Made a pretty heavy amount of tweaks in the highlights and the shadows and the overall whites and blacks here to be able to get as much dynamic range out of that image as possible and have it get as close to matching this S-Cinetone version. A little bit brighter over here, and that might be the dynamic range and ISO performance of sLOG3 versus S-Cinetone, but I think both of those look extremely clean. But you tell me. I'm gonna put both of these up on screen now and you can look at the differences. Unrelated note, my friend Tommy Calloway, you can check out his channel out here if you want to get into some deep cuts on some lighting. He's got a lot of Sony stuff on there, some red stuff, some microphone stuff. Fantastic dude on top of the really good content. Anyways, he sent me over this LUT to check out when he was getting into his red camera and comparing that to the A7S3. It's a really good LUT for S-Log. So kind of just a bonus piece here. I want to show you what this thing's looking like. So this is that same clip that we've been using all day. But when I apply Tommy's LUT to it, I think that we get a pretty cool image that is, I think it's punchy, it's clean, I like the tones that are coming in. Did a little bit of tweaking, which you can see in the panel there, but overall, really good image. I'm gonna put a link to this down below. You should definitely go check that one out. Fan noise kicked in. Hear that? Drives me crazy. I was running the M1 for a while, no fan noise. So conclusions, I'll keep this as straightforward as possible. S-Cinetone, what I like is it's quick. It looks really good coming out of camera if you get your white balance and exposure right. I really like how it handles the skin tones, which is the main priority of this picture profile in the first place. And back on point one, it just generally looks amazing. What I don't like about S-Cinetone is actually the ISO, and more so how it handles light. It's a good thing that S-Cinetone allows us to go all the way down to 100 as our base ISO. What I don't like is that it's extremely sensitive to light. In this shot, for example, I don't like that I have to have my ISO all the way down to 100. My key light is down to like 5–6%, and then my overall background just gets really lost. I know I'm shooting on a black background. I do a lot of shooting on dark backgrounds outside of just this shot. In my other work, it tends to be on dark backgrounds as well. And a small filmmaking trick is to make a dark background pop, bring your ISO up, and bring your key light down. Now, the problem with this, with the S-Cinetone, is that I can get my ISO for this shot all the way down to 100, but my key light has to also be down to like 5 or 6% for proper exposure. If I bring my ISO up to like 320 where I want to be to make the background pop, I don't have any option on my key light. I can't get that low enough to be able to give that ISO setting, so I don't love that. Now for sLOG3, what I like is the obvious, what everybody likes. I like the dynamic range that we can get out of sLOG3. If you don't understand dynamic range, it's how much detail is in the shadow versus how much detail is in the highlights. You can have both with sLOG3 because the amount of dynamic range if you expose it properly. That's a good thing. We've associated that dynamic range with cinematic, and it's really pleasing if you get it right. The other thing I like about sLOG3 is using the phantom LUTs. I think we saw this when we were looking in Premiere and in those test shots that the phantom LUTs actually look a lot like the S-Cinetone shots, which is a good thing, meaning they handle skin tones extremely well. What I don't like about sLOG3 is simply the amount of work that it takes to get a good looking image. Your base ISO is 640, which is big progress from the last Sony cameras where the base ISO was a lot higher. We now have the luxury of getting that down to 640. Still a little bit too high for me, and there's certain situations I wish I could get that lower without having to put an ND filter on or change my f-stop. And for those reasons, sLOG3 is not going to be my go-to. I still like sLOG3, I'll still be shooting sLOG3 when I am definitely needing that amount of dynamic range, but I'm not going to be shooting with it every single day. Which means that my go-to picture profile must be S-Cinetone, right? So all of you in the comments down below earlier on in this video who dropped in, it's going to be S-Cinetone, looks like S-Cinetone, you are 100%, well, maybe more like 50% wrong. My go-to picture profile is not going to be picture profile 11 S-Cinetone. Don't worry, I'm going to show you exactly what my actual go-to picture profile is, and the reason that I'm not using either S-Cinetone as is or the sLOG3 picture profile that we reviewed is because I don't like those trade-offs. I don't like the negatives about either of those things. I don't like the ISO performance in S-Cinetone, and I don't like the amount of work that it takes in sLOG3 to get a clean image on a regular basis. So I found something that does both. After a tremendous amount of test shots, what I've landed on is this. It's something that allows me to get a really clean look for the skin tones, just like S-Cinetone, as well as offering a little bit more dynamic range and more flexibility with ISO performance than the basic S-Cinetone. So here's where I've landed. I'm gonna be using the gamut of Cine 2. My color mode is going to be S-Cinetone. My detail is going to stay at -2. No changes besides that. I've been really happy with the results this has been producing. It's been what you all have been looking at for the majority of this video, and I'm going to pop up on screen right now this custom Cine 2/Cinetone picture profile with the same shots as the other two. I'm going to put those up on screen right now so that you can check them out and you can see what I mean. All right, these are those mystery clips from earlier on today when we were going through sLOG3 and looking at that versus S-Cinetone. I had these clips on the left that I said more on those later. And yeah, now that you know, yes, these are that Cine 2 and S-Cinetone kind of combo picture profile that I'm running. And when you grade these properly, I think that they look exceptional. And it's the cleanest look that I think I've gotten out of the S3 so far. So again, when that's graded up the right way, bang, you get something that looks really good. But full resolution, fully exported up against all the other ones we shot. Let's take a look at it. Truth is, these are all good options. And you might be out there saying, what, sLOG3 is my go-to. I love the results I get. I like the sLOG3 clips in this video, and that's great. You do you. This is gonna be what I'm gonna be running for the majority of my shooting. Which really starts to beg the question of, wasn't this whole S-Cinetone thing supposed to be a 3-part series? Where last time I did exposure, this time I'm doing up against sLOG3. Next video was supposed to be how does it perform in low light. I'm gonna scratch that video. Look, on the A7S3, S-Cinetone is gonna perform extremely well in low light. It's not gonna be my go-to shooting profile anymore, so I'm not gonna do the tests on it. But that's gonna do it for me. My name is Sean DeWispelaire. This channel is all about the skills behind the art of creativity, photography, videography, editing, tutorials, gear. Me being full-time in the fitness industry, it's always gonna have just a bit of a fitness feel to it, and I always want it to be a learning channel. I'm learning next to all of you over the course of time. Small things we learn turn out to be pretty big results. So if any of that is something that you're into, hit the subscribe button down below, and I will look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care. See ya. Daisy, don't worry, I didn't forget about you. I know you put in the comments you wanted to learn about this base ISO versus what's dual ISO, so we're gonna do that right now. I know I said I would do that in the low light performance video, so like I said, not gonna leave you hanging on this one. Let's run through this really quickly right now. So in short, this dual ISO thing, each picture profile has a base ISO. I'm gonna put a chart up on screen for you right now so you can see what those base ISOs are. As we progress on the chart of ISOs, what happens is when you increase ISO, you might increase a little bit of noise in your image. For each picture profile, a certain amount of stops away from the base ISO, it's not real native dual ISO, but the image will clean up at this second kind of base ISO, and then from there we can reintroduce that scale, though it's a little bit different. As we add ISO from there, we might introduce some more noise into our image depending upon exposure. So let me show you exactly what I mean. All right, so for this example, we're gonna be using sLOG3, but it's the same idea for any picture profile. This one just displays the dual ISO thing a lot better than the rest. So I got my lens cap on so we can make it as dark as possible. I'm just gonna adjust the ISO. As we go up, you're gonna see noise getting introduced. Right now we're at 640, 800, 1000, 1250, 1600, 2000. We can start to see some noise getting introduced. 2500, 3200, 4000, 5000, 6400, 8,000, 10,000, and you see a lot of noise here, and we're about to hit that dual ISO number. Just looking at the chart, again, it's gonna be different for different picture profiles. And now we go to 12,800 and the image cleans up a lot, and we restart that entire process. This is that dual native ISO idea, though it's not true dual native ISO. 16,000, 20,000, 25.6, and we start to see some noise creeping up here as I get to 51,200, and that is the overall restart of that ISO performance. But just back down here, that difference between, here's 10,000 and there's 12.8. 10,000, 12.8.